Morning. Another day, another real world test. Today we're doing on the Samsung Galaxy A52 5G, which is the sequel to the top selling Android phone in the world last year, the A51. Let's find out why, maybe. But if you're not familiar, I'm going to use this phone as my normal phone. My SIM card is in it and everything. I'm going to do the normal things you do on a phone. Even if you don't see them, I did them. Now, I will also take photos on this phone and a few of its competitors and put that up on the screen for you guys to check that out, as well as talk about some of the features I like and don't like about it, and we'll eventually talk about the battery life as well. But in the last video, I went to a neighborhood just south of me, and the fastest way to get there was apparently not a car, which is what I thought it would have been. It was to take a bike. This neighborhood is right next to that, and looking at Google Maps, now the fastest way, well, it's gonna be the train. And welcome to Bushwick. Now, most of Brooklyn, including Bushwick here, used to all be part of New Netherland, which was obviously the Dutch colony when the Dutch settled here in like the 1600s. And the name Bushwick actually comes from this word. I tried to pronounce the Red Hook original word in that video, and I butchered it. So anyone who speaks Dutch out there, if you want to let us know in the comments how you pronounce that word, appreciate it. But I do know that it meant town in the woods, which, well, it's not that anymore. Now, Bushwick itself used to also include Williamsburg, which is a neighborhood that I live in, that we just came from, and also Greenpoint, which is the neighborhood directly above Williamsburg, which is actually where my studio is with Michael Fisher and Jaime Rivera, who you might know from Mr. Mobile and Pocket Now. Now, since 2000, rising prices in Manhattan, and even in my neighborhood of Williamsburg and Park Slope, which is also nearby here after that, started to make Bushwick a lot more appealing to young professionals and a ton of artists. And they really liked all of the warehouses that were down here and that were converted into pretty cool apartments. And we'll wander around a bit more and check out this hood. But first things first. I think I just might. Coffee. Check. And today we actually went for a pour over. Usually go for a latte, but needed the extra kick today, I think. I'm exhausted. I don't know why. Said everyone ever during COVID, basically. Now, first stop here in Bushwick is a coffee shop called Nook that opened 2 weeks ago. Now, I spoke to the owner, David. Great name. But he's been trying to open this place up for a while, and just with COVID and all these regulations and other things. But after all that, he finally opened what he calls an experimental boutique cafe and beer parlor. Also, he told me that while he was about to open and they were waiting for permits and stuff and they were kind of building some of the stuff in there, he decided that he was going to start building the furniture. So for the 3 months before this opened, he built a ton of the stuff you see in here. And he then also decided, you know what? I'm going to open a woodworking shop down the street. Just love that. All right, the first thing I want to talk about with this phone is the way that it feels and looks. Now, it is a relatively cheap device. It is $499, and I just came off using the A42, which is $399. Now, they both have plastic backs, but I will say this one feels way better. It's got this matte texture to it. It looks really nice. It doesn't have a lot of fingerprints on it when you're using it. All in all, just automatically feels and makes this device look more premium by a bigger margin than the price would say between the A42 and the A52. Also, this device is IP67 rated, so you can dunk it in fresh water down to about a meter for up to 30 minutes, which is something the A42 doesn't have. And while we do have a super AMOLED screen like we do on the A42, the colors are vibrant and the screen's very bright. I can see it fine in the daylight, which is all I care about as always, but we do have a slightly higher resolution as FHD+, and that does actually kind of make a difference. The icons and everything just on it seem a lot more crisp than they did on the A42. Now, besides that, we do have a punch hole notch instead of a teardrop, which is obviously harder for Samsung to do, and so it comes on this slightly higher tiered device as opposed to the lower tiered one. But one of the things that's going to make the biggest difference in your day-to-day use with this device, which I appreciate on a device at this price range, is that it has a 120 hertz display, which means scrolling and playing games and other things is a lot smoother. Sometimes it feels like it's a subtle thing, but when you go from using one of those devices without it to one with it, it definitely makes the device just feel more responsive, which is kind of nice. Oh, the guy that works here just brought me some cookies. Said that the owner's mother makes them. I can't say no to a cookie. They're like ultra chewy cookies, which I really like. All right, now there's something I want to show you guys that's very particular to this hood. So in this neighborhood, there's a thing called the Bushwick Collective, which happens to be one of the largest collections of outdoor street art in the world. Now, it was started back in 2012 by a Bushwick native named Joe Ficalora. Having suffered the losses of both of his parents, he started this to try to help him kind of revive himself as well as the neighborhood and help him kind of cope with some of the painful memories. Fast forward to today, and some of the most well-known graffiti artists of our time have all exhibited their own art here, as well as a ton of local Brooklyn artists as well. And all of the art here is temporary. They're usually here on about a 12-month basis, and then they cycle out and they get replaced with new ones. So it's actually a really cool art gallery of sorts that just kind of rotates continuously. And some of the art here is just like so detailed and so incredible. It's kind of a cool thing just to walk around and check out. And this probably seems like a good time to talk about the cameras on this phone. So firstly, we have a 12 megapixel f2.2 ultra wide camera, and then we have a 64 megapixel f1.8 aperture main camera that has optical stabilization. And while that ultra wide is the same as the A42, the main camera is a little bit of a step up at least. And then we have two 5 megapixel cameras that I notoriously don't really like. One of them is a macro camera and the other one is a depth sensor. And to me, those kind of just feel a little pointless. We already know that you can use an ultra wide camera in order to get macro shots. We've seen other companies do that plenty of times. And depth sensors, you can usually get depth information if you just have two cameras, which this, besides those two, already has. So as always with these, I feel like those are just two cameras that they add because they're like the cheapest ones in the bucket, and they just throw them on the back and they go, we have 4 cameras now. Ha, that's great. But they're not really that useful. Now for video, we can shoot in 4K at up to 30 frames per second, and thankfully that works on all of the cameras, the ultra wide, the main, and even if you zoom in 2 times, which of course is a digital crop and not a new lens, but still. Kind of nice that you can do 4K on all of those. In addition to that, you can also do it on the front camera as well. And for stills, that front camera is a 32 megapixel f2.2 aperture camera. Hey, how are you? So we stopped to get some tacos, but this taco spot is a bit unique. So it's called Los Hermanos, which means the brothers in Spanish. And while it is a place you can buy a taco, it's actually first and foremost a tortilla factory. Now, it just made sense after they were making all of the tortillas here and sending them off to other places that they might as well just throw a few things in them and sell tacos. And so of course the big draw here is the fact that these tortillas are made fresh and right next door in their factory. Okay. Yeah, that's a good taco. Now real quick though, let's talk a bit more about this phone. Firstly, the fingerprint sensor on this phone compared to the A42 that I complained about in that video is much better. And I don't know if that has to do with the sensor itself is actually a better sensor, or if it's just the extra RAM or something, but regardless, it's a lot easier to use and much snappier than the one on the A42. Now as for colors, the phone comes in awesome black, awesome white, awesome violet, and awesome blue. Yes, those are the names. Now outside of the United States though, you can get all 4 of those colors. In the United States, however, at least right now, you can only get the black. And so if you want to change the color of the phone as well as maybe protect it, well then we should talk about today's sponsor, Rhino Shield. Rhino Shield makes cases that aren't just extremely impact protective, they also look good, and I personally appreciate that they're super protective, but not bulky. They have their Solid Suit line that is a no-fuss protective case that comes in a ton of designs, colors, and finishes. But they also have their modular Mod NX cases, which allow you to mix and match a backplate with various case rim colors, but also swap out the backplate for a bumper case if that's more your style. They also have a ton of exclusive cases from NASA, PewDiePie, League of Legends, and a ton of others, and you can even design your own case with your own text and photo. They have cases for the A52, but also most other Samsung devices, as well as other Android manufacturers and all iPhones. They also ship worldwide and have free shipping for qualified orders, as well as a lifetime warranty for their cases. So check out their cases at the link in the description below and use code UNLOCKER for 20% off in the first 48 hours after this video goes live and 10% off after that. Okay, on to the next place. Getting cold because the weather said it was going to be warm today and tonight, and so I dressed like this, and it lied, as it usually does. Thankfully though, this place has a really good heat lamp, and this place is called Honey's, and it's actually the cocktail bar and the tasting room for Enlightenment Wines, which is the first meadery in New York City. Now, if you're not familiar, mead is actually honey wine, which is hence the name of this place. That's why it's called Honey's. But how it works is, instead of using grapes and the sugar in those to then ferment that and create wine and alcohol, they use diluted honey, and that becomes the sugar that the yeast then feeds on and converts into alcohol. Now, because honey is antibacterial, they dilute it down with water till it gets to a certain point that the yeast can actually feed on the sugar. And then on top of that, they add botanicals and flowers and herbs and that kind of stuff to get different flavors out of it. And when it's all said and done, you're looking at around 12.5% alcohol, just like most wines. Now, like some of the things on here have black currants and local New York honey, chrysanthemum flowers, foraged hemlock. But the one I want to try, actually, is this last one, because I'm a big fan of sour beer and I haven't had one in a long time, and the bartender told me that that's kind of what this tastes like, so let's try that. Cheers. It's pretty cool. This is like a stronger sour beer, but there's like a lot of different flavors in it. I like mead. Who knew? Also, I was talking to the owner, and they have a new chef coming in, but apparently she's super inventive, and she's going to be taking some of the meads from the winery here, as well as ingredients from their rooftop garden that they have to create a whole new like spring, summer menu starting next month. So now I have to come back next month. You know, something that's really helping this phone, I've realized, compared to the A42, is the fact that it comes, its lowest tier comes with 6 gigs of RAM compared to the 4 of the A42. You can also go up to 8 gigs of RAM, and with the A42 you can go up to 6. But I've decided now, because of how that device feels and how this device feels, that 6 might be the minimum I would probably go with. And so it makes this feel a lot more responsive and snappy and just doesn't slow down as much as the 42 did. But beyond that, we also have 128 gigs of internal storage, standard, which is great, but unlike even some of the S series nowadays and more expensive devices, we still have a micro SD card slot, so you can upgrade that storage yourself by buying a micro SD card, which I know a lot of you really are upset is no longer on the S series and the Note series, so kind of nice that it's still here at least. Now, the processor inside here is the Qualcomm Snapdragon 750G, which is their relatively new mid-range chipset. It's the same one that's in the A42, but again, paired with 6 gigs of RAM, it just feels a lot better here. Now, as far as gaming is concerned, we do have that 120 hertz screen, so you can use games to take advantage of that. But I used Asphalt 9, which is kind of a game that I like to play, so I always test that on phones. But it ran just fine. Is it the smoothest? Meh. But it's good enough. And the truth is, as I've said before, most games are gonna run fine on a mid-tier chipset and a mid-tier device. The reason is that most people who make games, developers, want as many people to be able to play their game as possible. And so they're not going to make their games so intense that only the top tier devices can play them. They just want users. So they're going to kind of make it set at a lowest common denominator so that a lot of people can play it. And then of course, those people with the higher tiered devices will just have a smoother time playing it. But even that, on a lot of things, is questionable, unless you're playing like a shooter, something that requires a lot of real hardcore reaction time. So this area might look familiar because in another video, the pizza crawl video, which I'll link, we were here with Mr. Mobile, Michael Fisher, and David Amell, and that's Roberta's. We're not going there today. Today, we're heading over to this neon sign thing. For our last stop of the night, it's called Syndicated, and it actually used to be a warehouse like many of the other things down here, but they actually built a wall, converted this whole area into a rather large and very spacious bar, and they even built an actual theater in the back where you can come and see movies. But once the lights go down, no one is allowed to talk, so there's actually a way for you to write down your order after using the QR code menu to tell your server what you want. And the whole place has this like Art Deco vibe, which I'm kind of digging. And they even have an outdoor space, which they actually show free movies. So you need a ticket for the one in the back, like a normal movie theater. But in the front, the movies are free. You can sit down and order food and drinks out there like you normally would, but the movie just kind of plays in the background. I just think that's kind of cool. It's already got a KCBC beer. It's actually a rice lager. KCBC is the Kings County Brewing Collective, which is a brewery around the corner here. Maybe we'll check that out in another video. Then I also got the burger. Just haven't had a burger in a while. And if you've seen the video I was talking about with Roberta's, I'm not having pizza anytime soon. Super simple, just good burger. Anyway, a little bit more about this phone. Okay, now as the name would imply for this phone, it is the Galaxy A52 5G, and so it supports 5G. Only sub-6 though. There is no millimeter wave, and the difference between the two is sub-6 is under 6 gigahertz, and that's what most of the 5G is across the world frequency-wise. Millimeter wave is the higher frequencies that you see like Verizon, for example, have, and it's where they tout those super fast speeds, but it's just much less available. Sub-6 has a much longer reach per tower, etc., etc., etc. But that's only really gonna matter too much to you if you live in an area with a lot of millimeter wave. Otherwise, your sub-6 5G is what you're probably going to be using anyway. So it's just to know. Unlike the A42, which actually has both. And for battery, we have a 4,500 milliamp battery in here, which we're going to talk about how it did today a little bit later. But in addition to that, we have 25 watt fast charging, which supposedly can get it from 0 to 50% in about 30 minutes. Something to note though, unlike the S series, a charger actually comes in the box. Okay, and the battery is getting pretty low, and it's also getting pretty late. So, let's head home. See if we can kind of wrap up our thoughts about this. I'm not gonna make it. So I'm gonna make it. calling it a night. It is 10:44 p.m. and we are at 1%. Just made it. And here is my screen on time and my usage for anyone who's curious about that from today. And here's my screen on time and usage from another day that was not a real world test, so a more conventional day. I will say that I think the combination of the relatively large battery and the mid-range chipset has pretty decent battery life. It's not amazing. Actually, the A52 did a better job. It has a 5,000 milliamp battery compared to the 4,500, so that was a decent amount more, but not bad. Still lasted me only just a full one of these videos, which is a lot of filming and just photos and everything that just drains the battery a lot. So that's pretty good. Now, I also kind of get why this phone is one of the most popular. It's the sequel to one of the most popular Android phones out there. And that's because at this price range, it feels like it's hitting a bit higher than its own weight class, as opposed to the A42. Whereas with this phone, you're kind of feeling like you're getting a bit of a deal because it has a lot of the features, or at least some of the features, of phones that are a lot more expensive than it. So it kind of feels like a good value for the money. And obviously with COVID and everything that's been going on in the last year, value for money is something that a lot of people are thinking a lot more about than maybe they used to. Now, I will leave a link below, speaking of value, to the cheapest price that I could find on this device, as well as links to the cheapest prices that I could find on the other devices that I tested here, because a lot of those prices have come down and it makes it a little harder to choose between this one and those. Honestly, the camera of the Pixel 4a 5G, I think is a bit better than this phone, but taking everything into account of all the other features, that's something I leave to you guys. But again, I will leave links to all of those below, as well as links to all the places that I visited, because you guys have asked me for that in the past, and frankly, I just like kind of promoting the places, these local places around New York City. So please go check those out as well. And thanks again to Ron & Shield for sponsoring this video. Don't forget to check out the link in the description below and use the coupon code on the screen here on Locker to get a discount. Otherwise, if you like this video, please thumbs up it or share it. It's greatly appreciated. Also, check out the rest of the channel. If you like what you see there, please subscribe and ding the bell next to where subscribe so you get notified when I do new videos. Otherwise, also, I'll leave a link here to all my other real-world tests if you just want to explore other hoods. I do that a lot in these videos. Go check the rest of them out. Appreciate that as well. As always, though, regardless, thanks for watching. I hear the truck. I hear another truck. There's always trucks. Too many trucks. Oh, followed by an ambulance or a police car. Siren of some sort. An undercover cop. Filming in New York City. It's always like this. Every time. This is what you don't see, but every time. Now there's a grinder, a drill, something. Ah, good times.